Our goal is to learn vocabulary taught by Pope St. John in parts 1 and 2. Above all, the concepts of rights, duties, and reciprocity, and the common good. Let's talk about these concepts. First, in Philosophy 225, virtue has been our most important description of human goodness. And I want to point out that the virtues are in Peace on Earth. For example, the very first sentence of Peace on Earth, Pope St. John writes, "Peace on earth can never be established except by the diligent observance of the divinely established order." Diligent observance is a name for one of the cardinal virtues, justice. A person who has justice has the habit of obeying authority and giving to others what they're due. Similarly, on pages 14, our author refers to justice and also to the theological virtue charity. Like Socrates, he refers in the introduction to the wisdom of God. And then finally, on page 67, which is in our extra reading, our author refers to prudence. I'll read you the quote on page 67. "These are matters for prudence to decide. Prudence, the queen of all the virtues, which rule the lives of men, both as individuals and in society." So virtues are present in our text. However, our author isn't proposing virtue ethics as a way of talking about human goodness. He's in particular going to teach us the language of the other theory, which in philosophy we call deontology. That theory organizing and describing human goodness with the duties. And with the concept of duties, our author adds the concept of rights. So let's learn these ideas. In part 1, our author provides a summary or inventory of many basic rights or natural rights. For example, our author refers to the right to health, and Pope St. John refers to the right to own possessions, and the right to worship, and the right to raise my own children, and belong to the common good. There are rights for almost every human commitment, for every human wish. I've learned in philosophy that many times there are good synonyms of key concepts, and these synonyms sometimes help us understand the preferred term. So, for example, Pope St. John refers to interests as a synonym of rights. So we can understand rights as interests. And he also uses the term aims. So a right is a kind of aim, or we could use rights and aims interchangeably. There isn't an explicit definition of rights in Peace on Earth. I'm going to provide you my definition of what a right is. A right is what I form when I recognize something is a worthwhile attainment for me. I'll read that again. A right is what I form when I recognize something is a worthwhile attainment for me. Attainment, I think, is an important word there. Many times when we use the word right, like we'll say, I have a right to my room or a right to my privacy, we often refer to something that we already have. But very often rights are things that we don't yet have, that we have seen and now we wish to attain that thing. So rights are very often a kind of attainment. Several of the rights that Pope St. John mentions are what we might call life rights. For example, the very first right in Part 1, the right to live. I think we can interpret that to mean the right to biological life, the right to survive. And then he immediately lists a second life right, the right to a basic living. Those things that Henry Thoreau simplifies: shelter, food, health. Another important life right, according to Pope St. John, the right to choose my own way of life. And when Pope St. John makes this statement, he also mentions two possible types of life: family life and religious life. Important, all of the rights listed by Pope St. John are universal rights. In other words, any human being will form these rights. Perhaps not all at once, but at points in life when these rights are relevant or they become important. Pope St. John teaches the following idea, that whenever we form a right to something, we immediately also form a duty to that right. In other words, we form a duty to pursue that right. So for Pope St. John, there's an intimate relationship between rights and duties. Let's look at Pope St. John explaining these two concepts with examples. On page 12, Pope St. John writes, for example, the right to live involves the duty to preserve one's life, the right to a decent standard of living, the duty to live in a becoming fashion, the right to be free to seek out the truth, the duty to devote oneself to an ever deeper and wider search for the truth. Louisa May Alcott guided us to a definition of what a duty is. We learned that a duty is a non-negotiable basic human action. And moreover, she mentions that to perform her duty, she had to disregard her feelings. Pope St. John has added or contributed a new part of the definition of a duty. Moreover, not only is a duty something non-negotiable and a basic action, every duty corresponds to some right. So the minute I form a right to something, I then form the duty to pursue that right. All good human conduct could be described, according to Pope St. John, in terms of rights and duties. Pope St. John mentions an important right that we might take for granted. In part 1, he mentions all of us naturally form the right to meet others, to gather with other persons, to associate with other persons, ultimately to live together in some way. And according to Pope St. John, all of us form this right to meet with others and live with others because human nature is naturally social. In other words, it is part of human nature that we desire to belong to others. This is an insight that comes from Aristotle. Aristotle is famous for insisting on human nature as social. But something funny happens the moment we dutifully pursue our right to belong to others, other persons. The moment we pursue belonging to other persons, it becomes a right to understand and be familiar with their rights. If the others are unhappy or in some way unavailable, I won't be able to fulfill my right to belong to them. So in short, to meet or gather or live with others, I must get to know their rights and dutifully pursue their rights. This is what Pope St. John calls reciprocity. Reciprocity is everyone pursuing each other's rights dutifully. Here's my definition, a simple definition of reciprocity. Reciprocity is people dutifully pursuing each other's rights. According to Pope St. John, all of us are bound in various forms of reciprocity with our families, with our friends, with our people at our work and at school. So while it's true that we are individual persons with natural dignity, we are also at the same time bound in various forms of reciprocity. This, I think, is a sophisticated way of expressing an insight from Louisa May Alcott, that we as humans are bound in relationships, and clearly this will have implications for human life and also the good life.